Little ASMR intro.
If you can open it, geez.
That's tough.
I think you're supposed to. It says it's got a scissor.
Does it really?
Yeah.
A single scissor?
Yeah. Is it scissors or scissor?
Scissors.
There's a scissors picture.
A pair of scissors.
Oh, look it. So convenient.
This is Kolsvart Elderflower candy fish.
Oh, like Swedish fish?
Like Swedish fish, yeah. For those of you who don't know, Sarah really likes gummies, so I got a bunch of gummies for you. These are elderflower ones.
I went through a phase where I really, really, really liked anything that was gummy. And Bryn would say, like, do you want anything from the grocery store? I'm going out. And I would say, like, just get me some gummy bears.
These are black currant and raspberry. This one is sour raspberry. And our last one is sour blueberry.
Oh my God, you've got so many of them.
I got every flavor they had, except for the plain blueberry ones. They had sour blueberry, so I was like, well, why wouldn't I get that?
Nice. We donate part of the proceeds from this product to protect and restore healthy water environments.
They're all different types of fish, it looks like, too.
Oh, I got the pike.
This one's a flounder. Sour blueberry with a flounder. That's very good. Wow. Oh, so gummy.
My biggest pet peeve about gummy bears is the chew factor. So many of them don't have a good chew.
The blueberry's better than the raspberry. The raspberry tastes like a cough drop. It's giving Ludens.
Which, to be fair, are candy, basically. Welcome to episode 7 of Cult Flavors Going Off. I'm Sarah.
I'm Bryn.
Fry is eating food. This week we've got a super late follow-up to one of our most popular reviews about knives. And then we're answering a few listener questions about, you guessed it, knives, and wrapping the whole thing up with an interview with Eytan Zias from Steelport, where we ask him to rank specialty knives.
I'm sensing a theme here.
His knives all the way down.
But first, let's back it up. In late 2023, which is crazy to me, we released a speed review of like 40 chef's knives, something like that. And one of the big questions was about a new steel formulation just hitting the market called MagnaCut. A lot of people asked about this. They were surprised we didn't include it because it was kind of the hot new thing. But they were really hard to come by then, knives using MagnaCut, of course. And they're still actually quite difficult to come by now. And they often fall under the custom or small run knife manufacturers. So that's what we're testing.
Yeah, we found some, and over the last few months, we've been putting them to the test in our home kitchen to see if they're actually worth the expense and the effort of tracking them down.
And now we've got strong opinions. But first, we want to thank our sponsors for this episode.
You,
137 of you.
That's right.
Man, cruising at this point.
It's so fun for us to get to make this content, and because of people who support the show, pay $20 a year, that means we get to make more content.
Thank you to all the people who went to the hassle of actually hunting down the subscribe button. I did, after publishing the video last week, end up updating the description. And I think that's probably where we should put it from now on. Is like, you can just go to cultflavor.com/community and just have that link in there. Because people were struggling to find it. But also, maybe an hour ago, I shipped the new nav. So
oh my God.
It's really easy to find. It's the first link in the nav. Not the subscriptions, just the community.
Yeah, it's so cool. I'm so excited.
It's so weird. I love it. I'm so obsessed with it. There's going to be some bugs to work out, but it's a huge, huge change, and I love it.
Yeah.
So
if you would like to support the show, it's pretty easy to do. You go to cultflave.com/community. There's an area where you can subscribe to the show. It's $20 a year.
It's right at the top of the page, whether you're on mobile or desktop.
Yeah.
You'll find it. It says community goals, and it shows you where we're at in relation to our end goal. So thank you all who have already done that. Thank you to you if you're considering it. We appreciate it.
Go check out the website. It's cool. Bryn put a lot of time into it. It's not like anything I've ever seen before.
That was the whole goal.
I'm going to gas him up because I'm excited for it.
It's so fun to make things that I've never made before. And that often means like moving away from typical things. But I still think it's pretty easy to use. So
go check it out.
Okay. So small run knives. We tested everything from $60 up to $750. I think there's 7 knives total that were in this smaller group. Most of them came from Epicurean Edge in Seattle. We happened to be in Portland and Seattle for a lot of the content of this video. And so we picked up a bunch there because they specialize in smaller and custom knives. MagnaCut, not really available en masse yet. And so finding small manufacturers that were working with it was the easiest way to get a hold of it. Secondarily, they had some other steels that we were interested in that were harder to find outside of the mainstream. And so this is really kind of generally focused on materials. But there's a few things you should know about small run knives. One, you're not getting economy of scale at all. We're talking expensive for the most part.
Yep.
You're also getting a lot of focus on aesthetics, in particular kind of weirder stuff. Lots of like tinted woods and like weird kind of marbly handles. You get some kind of out there Damascus finishes. We didn't get any Damascus, but like there were definitely a lot of those.
Yeah. Resin inlays.
But still, even there, geometry has much more impact than steel composition. Like there's a certain threshold above which you get diminishing returns really quickly. So even while you might pay for a better steel, you're not necessarily getting a lot of benefit for it, even though the cost may be like exponentially higher.
So it's more about geometry and less about steel type. And by geometry, what we mean is how it bites into the food when you slice it.
Yeah. So like, is it doing a lot of the work for you? Is it slowing you down? So a good example would be the initial version of the Steelport. This is Gen 1, I think. I had to have this reworked geometry-wise by Stephen Sharpens. I just had him work the flats, which basically just reduces the thickness at the spine and throughout the main body, compared to something like this Bradford, which is an AEB-L knife that we got at Epicurean Edge. The spine is so much thinner, and then even more so, you've got this Doberman Forge, which is a MagnaCut knife, even thinner, but it's almost too flat because it's so thin at the spine. It doesn't feel like it's very tapered. And so it doesn't have the same bite and it doesn't feel as nice sliding into the food.
The thing that I'm always thinking about is like, cool, does it rust? Is the geometry good?
Yeah, does it feel nice? And I will say that neither of the MagnaCut knives that we tested justified their cost through added benefits of the MagnaCut.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't particularly like either of them. I can pull them out quick. We've got the Doberman Forge, which is, I mean, it basically feels like a piece of sheet steel. It's like really
does,
flimsy.
yeah.
I really don't like this. I do like the wood handle, but it's made by like a Forge and Fire champion. And while I do like a lot about the profile of it, the actual geometry just didn't feel good in use. And so we very quickly just moved away from using it. It also dulled quite quickly.
Yeah.
Even though MagnaCut has really high edge retention scores. Then we've got the Aura Calafia, which is kitchen jewelry, I would say.
Oh, 100%
very much in that category.
kitchen jewelry. Yeah. This thing, if you're listening, it has a gemstone handle.
This one does not.
Well, they come in gemstone handles, and they have this very like shiny gold edging.
Edging is funny. Yeah, they come with brass or copper fittings and like one of many different handles. This one in particular is wood, but if you had your eyes closed, you wouldn't know the difference between it and plastic.
Yeah.
It's so smooth, and it doesn't necessarily feel great.
Yeah.
But in particular, the knife like length didn't feel good to us. It's quite long for its profile.
And so narrow too. I think
Yeah.
that's part of it. It's very long, very narrow.
We do have friends that really like theirs, but this hasn't been a good fit for us. Notably, all of them got it for free. But yeah, both of those are very expensive. The Doberman is $550. The Aura Calafia is $750.
Damn.
And in neither case was it worth it to me.
Yeah.
In the meantime, this Bradford we got from Epicurean Edge as well. It has a unfinished carbon fiber handle. It's very textured. I don't love the aesthetics of it or the feel of the handle, but when you're using a pinch grip, you're barely feeling it anyway. Like I'm hardly touching it except for like right here on the bottom. This thing feels incredible.
Yeah. If I don't have to test a knife for stuff like this, I am reaching for that because I just like it.
Yeah.
I like using it.
So this is made with a steel called AEB-L, which has a lot of similar properties to MagnaCut, but is less corrosion resistant and a little bit lower edge retention, but it's just much more available. It's not as available as like a mainstream knife steel, but it is more available and it's quite performant. It's very similar to my favorite carbon steel, 52-100, which is what the Steelport's made of, but it's significantly more corrosion resistant than that, of course.
Not completely corrosion resistant.
There's a couple of spots on here, but nothing terrible.
It'll fare better than carbon steel, that's for sure. If you are like me and accidentally leave it to dry. Leave it out on a towel to dry. I never do that. I always dry my knives right away.
I'm gonna get away from that. The other ones we tested were there. This is a Nakiri by Gedig. Nakiris are not for me, is one thing I'm learning.
Yeah, same.
I really like the utility of the tip. I understand that a lot of people are scared of tips. I understand that. But the shape doesn't do a lot for me as a general purpose knife. And I also I would much rather use a chef's knife for cutting vegetables anyway. But it has one thing that's fairly characteristic of smaller knives around the aesthetics. This is a blue, I believe, dyed wood handle, stabilized, I assume.
I have no idea.
It almost looks like stone, honestly, but I guess it's what
it's heavy.
It is very heavy. So yeah, so this Acre Forge, which we both really liked, this is RWL34, which is a Damasteel. Their junior version of this knife is made with AEB-L. I just wanted to see what their upgrade was because we already had enough AEB-L knives, and we'd still get to feel the profile, the geometry, all that stuff. So this is the Acre Forge Macrum. This has been a runaway success in our house.
Yeah.
I love this thing. It is a little bit weighted toward the back, but while it is quite heavy and it has quite a thick spine, the geometry feels incredible.
Yeah. Geometry is really nice. The only thing I've noticed about this knife, it does rust a little bit easier than some of our other knives. So you definitely want to dry it right away and not leave it out after you wash it. The specific handle that we got, which I think is nylon.
It's white marble is what it's called. I believe it's nylon, yeah. That sounds right.
It does have a tendency to slip around in your hand when you're washing it. I have noticed a couple of times that I'm not super confident in my grip on this thing if it gets sudsy.
Got it. That makes sense.
But other than that, I really enjoy using this knife. I like pulling it down from our magnet that we hold our knives on. I feel confident in its ability to cut things and do the thing that I want it to do. I think that's the majority of it. That's what I want. I just want to be confident that it's going to do the thing
and feel good while you're doing it. And I think the kind of core feature of this knife is that it's a 7¼ inch, not an 8-inch.
Yeah, I do tend to like knives that are shorter too, because I got small hands.
You can't keep saying that publicly.
It's all about how you use it.
Okay, so they do have a version of this that is AEB-L. This one is $325. That one is $300. So it is definitely on the pricier side. They do also make one-offs that have nicer hardwood handles. So I was very intrigued by those. If this sticks around in our kitchen for a long time, I'll probably invest in a nicer handle because that is the one weak spot of this knife, I think. It's just the handle material doesn't feel very nice.
I agree with that.
But when I'm using it, I'm barely feeling that anyway, and so it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. It does come in a bunch of different handle materials too. Yeah. So
the various smiths at Acre Forge, it's really cool that they have here's a one-off with Sapele or Koa or whatever handle, and it has the smith's name next to it. Just really nice details. So I guess after spending thousands of dollars and traveling and doing all this stuff, do we have some takeaways in general?
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure yours are a little bit different than mine, but I've learned, for me personally, the handle material is really important. Because if I don't like even pulling that handle down off of our magnet, I'm not going to want to reach for it. But I think it's a sensory thing. I think the geometry is really important. So that means just trying to test it out if you can before you buy it. Make sure that you like the way that it slices into things. Make sure that it makes sense to you.
The traditional advice has been see how a knife feels in your hand before you buy it. That's less possible now with online shopping.
Totally.
But also people just hold it and they don't understand what they should be looking for in terms of testing. When someone pulls out a carrot at a shop and they give you a display knife that's probably pretty dull anyway, you're not getting a good feel for it regardless. It's such a weird industry to actually get a feel for because most people just have no idea what they're looking for at all.
It's hard.
But that first bite is usually the telltale sign. And then can it push all the way through or does it wedge?
Yeah. Do these online companies have return policies and what do they look like? I guess is the other question. But the other thing that I like to look for now in a knife is where it falls. If I'm just holding it loosely, I want a lot of the weight to be more in the front of the blade versus the back of the blade. And I know if it's in the front of the blade, I'm going to be more confident for some reason in my ability to use it.
It takes less work. Yeah. It's a very small amount of difference, but it takes less work.
So those are my three things.
I think I'm not of the belief that most people should get a small run knife. You're going to run into more weird edge cases. You're going to run into more inconsistencies. I think the reasons you might want one would be if it like speaks to you as like an art object.
Yeah.
That could totally be a good reason. If it doesn't, it's almost certainly not worth the cost. AEB-L, not dramatically better than many steels. 52100 is becoming more and more prominent on the carbon steel side. They're kind of equivalent for me. The cheapest knives were often the best ones. Like the two cheapest customs we tested were our favorites, while the more expensive ones just fell off drastically.
Yeah. It seemed like they were just trying a little too hard.
In some cases, the Doberman doesn't feel like it was trying hard enough.
That's true. That's true.
It really feels like a wood-handled version of like a very generic, like
sheet.
One of those like nylon like food service knives. It's like that same profile. It's a very similar handle shape. It just it reminds me of that, and it doesn't feel good.
A Victorinox.
Yeah. It also has the worst font I've ever seen on a knife.
Okay, Bryn, your designer showing.
I know. I'm sorry. In general, like it's kind of the same reason that I really like the Steelport. Like now that it's customized, once you have good geometry, something just feels great to you across the board. Like it nails the aesthetics, it nails the performance, it nails all those things. That's like the sweet spot. And if you've got the budget to spend on it, great. Otherwise, I would say, I think our recommendation for most people stays the exact same. The Headley & Bennett is like a good intermediate shape. It's a good intermediate weight. It has all the same characteristics in terms of performance, minus some edge retention, but it's actually much better at corrosion resistance, which is going to be a bigger deal for a lot of people.
Yep.
So,
and if you're looking for an art piece, I don't know, maybe check out Acre, because I think they've got some cool stuff.
They're doing some really cool custom stuff. I wouldn't call the Macrum and the Macrum Light, which are the two that we mentioned, like art pieces per se. They seem like they're definitely more leaning towards the commercial end of the scale. Very much utilitarian compared to a lot of the customs, but the customs are gorgeous, and a lot of them are in the same price range as the Steelport. So I think that 7.25 inch length is feeling better and better to me, but it's a very similar profile. I don't know, it's pretty great.
I'm telling you, a shorter knife is awesome. Okay, should we move on to some questions?
Yes. Questions sound great. Would you like to read the first one, or would you like me to read the first one? Okay.
Grant asks, I decided to look into custom knives, and I found Gold Vein by Come On GV number 2 for, this is insane to me, I'm going to round up, $55,000. It's like 54,600 change.
I'm going to round up, and then I'm going to tell you the price.
It's pretty, but goodness, if you could commission a custom knife for yourselves, what would it be like? What specific features, materials, or design elements would you choose, and what culinary tasks would it be designed for?
It's a very fun question.
It's a fun question. I don't want to go first.
We both looked up this knife. It is a nightmare for me personally.
It's insane.
Quintessential kitchen jewelry.
We'll have a link to it in the description, but it's Jesus.
It's not my taste.
It has it has a gold vein within the blade. Yeah. I don't want to say you're doing it wrong.
I guess if you've got $55,000 to blow on a knife, then you do you. Okay. Commissioning a custom knife. I mean, there are a few things that stand out to me right off the bat. One is I want the lightest handle possible, and I want it to be made of real wood, like hardwood. I don't need it to really be there, other than that it should hit like my wrist when I'm cutting, right?
Oh, got it. Okay.
In a pitch grip, I want it to like hit here to stop.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only function it really has to serve. I'm not going to hold it by it. I don't really care about it other than that. On the other hand, I like a fairly sharp geometric profile with a very low tip, similar to the Steelport and the Acre Forge and kind of that Santoku style shape. Mm-hmm. And then medium thick spine, just so it leans forward, kind of like you were saying. Mm-hmm. And I don't really have measurements for any of this, so it's hard to say what it is relatively, but like you kind of know when you feel it. Is a really lame answer for a podcast. And then I just want it to have that bite. Like I think the Acre Forge shape is really good, and if it had a wood handle, I'd be pretty happy with that. It's also the fact that it's stainless just makes it more convenient.
Yeah, it really
although
does.
I don't mind carbon at all, and I don't really think much of the extra process. I know a lot of people make a big deal about it because live with people who are going to wash it and not put it away.
Yep.
And leave it wet on the counter.
Never.
Yep.
Who would do that?
I'm so sick of reading threads of like, my wife left my carbon steel pan out and it got rusty. Is it ruined? Like the old like, my significant other did X and ruined my cookware is such an annoying
Get over it, you babies.
thing.
You can clean it.
But yeah, I think that's it. I don't want to like make it anything fancy. I just want to make it something relatively small and utilitarian.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm definitely like riding that line between petty and chef's knife in length. Right around 7¼ inches is probably the sweet spot.
Yeah. Ditto.
Is that where you're at too? I kind of figured it.
Dude, we have very similar taste. Yeah, I'm exactly the same. Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that like if there can be more weight in the front of the knife versus like in the handle.
That's what I said.
That would be great.
The Acre Forge really feels like the stainless version of your Santoku.
It really, I think that's why I like it so much.
It's like a high-end version of the Mac Chef series that we recommend to people as like the cheap version. Yeah. So it definitely like, it's right in a sweet spot for I feel like you. Yeah. That's what made me very excited about it first. But I also have found that I really like it as well.
Yeah. I love my Mac.
Lim says, I got the Hirohira Santoku. That's the one we were just talking about after watching your Chef Knives review video. That shit slaps. Thanks for the rec. I picked that one out of the pack because it was highly rated on your list while not costing an arm and a leg. I think it was $115.
Yeah.
Something like that. In the world of small run or custom knives, do you see a price range where performance, craftsmanship, and cost all align before the benefits start diminishing? Also, they want a way for sending voice messages to the site, which I would love to do because a lot of international people cannot just call our phone number. So that's something we will almost certainly do, or make it so you can email us voice messages.
Mm-hmm. We'll figure it out.
That's a little side note though. Okay. Price range where performance, craftsmanship, and cost all align before the benefits start diminishing.
Ooh.
I mean, immediately, like when you're in this world, you are in a much higher price point. I would say it's somewhere around double where that happens in large run manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So like 300-ish.
Yeah.
Like I think 150 is where it starts to diminish in like large run manufacturing, maybe 200.
Like looking at our knives that we have out right now, the Doberman is exactly where I would say like, oh, diminishing returns. It was so expensive and not worth it.
We started seeing a big drop off really after the Acre Forge. Mm-hmm. So I'd say the Gettig, which is more expensive, the Doberman, and the Calafia, the Aura Calafia, are all at that point. Yes. I think maybe up to 400. So like 300 to 400 is probably the sweet spot for a small run. Yeah. Like Steelport feels to me still small run, but maybe on the larger end of small run.
Yeah, anything over $400. It seems like it's
going to be dropping off pretty quick.
Dropping off, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to like it as much. Because how much was the Doberman again?
Doberman was $550.
Yeah. No.
I mean, listen, people can price things however they want. It's not like a 1-to-1-to-1.
Totally. But if you don't like using it, that sucks.
We've seen the best outcomes in that kind of 300, 400 price range. Although the $200 Bradford, also great.
I know. Maybe exception to the rule? Emily asks, thinking about a question you answered, if it works, it's not stupid.
So that's Drew's question from an episode or two ago?
I was like, yeah, a few episodes ago. I only recently grabbed a serrated knife for breads, but otherwise I use my Wusthof Knockery. I had to Google this. For everything, even if my chef's knife would be a more appropriate tool. What are y'all's thoughts on using the right knife for the job versus using a knife I'm comfortable with? Comfortable is in quotes.
I have very strong opinions on this, but do you have anything?
Listen, this is coming from somebody who used a paring knife to cut everything for the longest time because she was afraid to use a chef's knife. I will say, use the thing that you are the most comfortable with until someone laughs at you.
Wow. A weird strategy.
If you are comfortable using a paring knife to cut everything, use the paring knife to cut everything. The only person that's going to get upset with you is somebody who's really into cooking, and they might just ask you why you don't do it.
Or just someone annoying. People can be into cooking and not be assholes. I know, it's surprising.
I don't think the right tool for the job should be the thing that's prohibiting you from starting.
I think that's a nice sentiment.
That's my take on it.
I hate the way the cooking industry talks about this kind of thing. The like advice to use the right tool for the job is probably more useful on a longer term. If you really like cooking, and if you don't like cooking very much, I don't know why you're listening to this, but if you do like cooking over a longer term, I do think learning to use a chef's knife well and getting really comfortable with that to the point where maybe you don't just reach for a knockery for it, could be beneficial to you. But one thing, like this is the thing I hate, the you're doing it wrong aspect of the way that cooking advice is doled out. And this is why I can't stand Christopher Kimball and why I talk about it a lot is like
Does he need 30 seconds on the clock?
He's literally everything I hate about the cooking industry. And that's largely because he formed most of it. Like ATK is largely his responsibility, Cook's Country, and now Milk Street, where their whole shtick is I learned how to do it this one way, this one time, and that must be the correct way to do it. And so every video will start with you're doing X wrong, and it can be making rice. And I learned how to make it in a Japanese mountain town. Like this is the stupidest thing.
Off.
Yeah, like go suck a bag of dicks. Like what are you talking about? Use whatever's right for you. I don't care. I will never tell you you're doing it the wrong way unless I'm worried that you're gonna like cause yourself harm, like real physical harm that is like irreversible. So like giving yourself botulism, then yes, you should probably have some like outside counsel. But beyond that, like if you want to use a serrated knife, if you want to use a knockery, like if you want to use a chef's knife, I really don't care. You can use a
paring
knife forever. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't harm me in any way. Do whatever you want. However, I do think it probably benefits you over the long term to learn to be comfortable with more types of knives. That is the entire sentiment.
Tools are nice. They're not a must.
Enjoying cooking is more important. Yeah. As long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else, enjoying your time doing it is like the game changer, right? Yep. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to rant against Christopher Kimball, my arch nemesis.
I know, I was going to say, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Thank you to Grant, Lim, and Emily for asking us questions. If you have questions and you'd like us to answer them on the show, you can go to our website, cultflave.com/community, hop into our Going Off channel and ask questions there, or you can give us a call and leave us a voicemail at 424-419-3528.
Okay, time for Absolutely Rank. This week, I guess in August, September?
Yeah, it was this summer, yeah.
We went up to Portland. This is when we got all these knives. We went to Portland, Seattle. I quit my job and then we came back. While we were there, we got to spend some time with the folks at Steelport, and especially their knifesmith, Eytan Zias, who not only has he worked in kitchens with knives, but also he runs several knife shops, and now he makes his own knives through Steelport. Some of our favorites, my daily drivers is Steelport from the earliest generations. They've actually included a lot of fixes for our earlier problems. So like that was very exciting to get to see in person. We got to see their whole process. The team was lovely and was so gracious with their time. They took us everywhere around the shop, showed us everything. It was really cool. It was very fun. We got to corner Eytan and ask him to play a game with us. It was kind of an interview/game. We didn't really know where it was going yet, but we asked him to rank 10 specialty knives on usefulness. And Eytan was such a good sport, and he dropped so much extra knowledge about knife craftsmanship during our conversation. It was really fun. This is a classic tier list, so it's just S, A, B, C, D, F.
Enjoy our Absolutely Rank with Eytan Zias. Welcome to Absolutely Rank, where we ask a guest to rank something. We're here today with Eytan Zias of Steelport to absolutely rank specialty knives.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Thanks for putting up with this intro. We're starting with an easy one because you make one. It's a boning or fillet knife.
So on a versatility, I would give it a B. Right? Okay. But since it's a specialty knife, if you do that type of work, then I would give it an S because you have to have it. So the idea of a boning knife is that one, you have to have a guard on it so you don't slip up. With most of your normal kitchen knives, you'll just slice your hand. After you butcher for a while, everything's cold, everything's wet. You don't know what you're cutting. Everything feels the same after a while. So guard's super important. And you're putting a different type of edge that you wouldn't want on your, petty, which is what I would normally use if I wasn't doing specialized work. It has to be more durable. You're working around bones. It still has to be sharp, but it has to be durable. So I would say as an all-around kitchen knife, I would give it a B, B minus. And reason being is that you can't actually make contact with the cutting board. Right? So
interesting.
What?
Yeah, because
it's so soft.
Let me give you an example. No, because you have that guard, right? So you have to have that guard in order to do that.
I never thought about that.
And then, but if you want to use it as a regular, kitchen knife, then you can't do that because you have all this space. So it doesn't make contact. You can do it
Right at the edge.
that way, but that's a very, that's not an efficient way of cutting. Right? And then you say, okay, why don't you just go with the full-size blade?
Yeah.
But then if you're doing a lamb rack or if you're doing more intricate stuff, then you don't have the maneuverability.
You don't want to French with this.
Of this, exactly. Right?
What is it that makes them flexible?
It's geometry. Our boning knives, they have a little bit of movement to them. They're still at 65 Rockwell, right? And if we went thinner, we can get them to be full flex. Yeah, so it's mainly geometry. It's not so much steel and steel hardness. You can get a very hard blade that will still flex. And
That's so
and
it
vice
breaks my brain a
versa.
little
Then
bit.
you can have a very soft steel, which will not, right? If it's thick.
I guess I didn't put together that you can't touch the actual table with that knife.
Yeah, and that's why we don't like knives with full bolsters on them, because they end up, the bolster stands proud, and then it's not
Especially
making,
once it's sharpened.
But that, you keep sharpening it. People at home can't really adjust the bolster on it, so you end up with the same result here.
Yeah.
And,
B minus.
B minus is an all-arounder, but if you do any butchering, I would give it a A or a S.
I would hope that most of these are really good at one task, but some of them I'm skeptical
and
of. So.
we're talking specialty knives, so hopefully so I'm going to give everything 2 rankings, and then we'll see if there are any that are not. But
all right, I like it.
Yeah.
Double ranking.
Yeah, there you go.
We get the most questions about this type of knife specifically, which is the Nakiri.
I would give it a B plus.
Okay.
Right? 1 ranking. I don't think there's anything that you can do with an Akiri that you can't do with a chef knife or a Santoku or a Bunka or any of those other ones. I think that it's a interchangeable knife. What's nice about those is they're taller, they're a little bit flatter. You can go for more speed because you can still ride your knuckles throughout the whole blade. You can use them for scooping, not as much as like a Chinese cleaver.
Right.
I would say I personally don't use one, but I recommend them to a lot of people, especially if they're professional cooks working the line.
When they're doing a specialized task repeatedly.
Not so much because of that, because when you're working on the line, then you have very limited space, and you need something which is, tall enough but short enough and can do everything. Right. So back in my day when I was cooking, everybody had what we called a line slicer, which was just a 6-inch petty. Right. Then I feel like everything went to the Santoku, but then with the larger blades, you keep messing up your tips. Right? So you got this little spot, and you usually have steel right behind here where all your prep is, and then you put it over here, and then people's tips keep breaking, so that knife doesn't have a tip on it. So yeah, B plus, but not for me.
Oh man, next up, the cleaver.
But we've got both of them. We got the side out, and we've got the Western meat cleaver.
All right, I would say that the Nakiri is interchangeable with everything else that we use that has enough height. That's an all-purpose knife. But the side out is just a lot of fun, right? And you can go really fast, and and you can scoop more with it. And I'd say I'd give that an A. A meat cleaver, I would give it more of I would give it a C minus, because what most people buy a cleaver for, you shouldn't be using a knife for, right? You should be using a bone saw, right? So if you go into any butcher shops, they have, band saws, special stainless, band saws. We used to have one at one restaurant. We used to call it the sobriety test, right? You didn't want to use it first thing in the morning. Those are dangerous, but that's the cleanest way to get through bone. Most people, they take that and they just splinter it. What I like instead of a cleaver, or the reason I'm not giving it a higher rank, is because I like Western Debas a lot. I don't know if that's going to be on there.
Western Deba?
Yeah.
Wait, so I'm used to the classic Japanese Deba for fish.
Yeah, so you have the kataba style, which is a hollow back, single bevel, extremely specialized. I love those. Most people don't know how to use them properly, and they definitely don't sharpen them properly, and it's not for everybody, right? But then you have a Western Deba, which is basically a very thick chef knife, usually going to be going to have a flat side and then like a hamaguri edge on the other side, like a clamshell edge. And those are, you can't use it as a chef knife because it's just going to split everything. If you go to cut a carrot, it'll just shoot it across the room, right?
Right.
But Since it's durable, you can do, I mean, the only reason for a cleaver is really kind of, I guess if you're like spatchcocking a chicken or something, if you know how a chicken is built, you can take it apart with a razor blade. If you're just going through joints and, separating, so you don't really need it for that. But if you're going through bones, it is delicate enough to go through bones, but it's also nimble enough that it's much more all-purpose, And that's my just absolute beater knife. Like anything I shouldn't be doing with a knife, I do with my deba. If I'm, God forbid, cutting something on a sheet pan or something like that, that's my beater knife. And then I just,
Interesting.
because it can handle everything.
So better to have a bandsaw or an anatomy lesson.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I recommend the latter. So
Great.
Yeah,
Love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Bird's beak peeling knife.
Ooh, okay. I would give it an F, except for two other reasons, right? For two reasons.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess I'll give it a solid B, right? So
That's a big jump from
an
F.
F to a B.
well, the two reasons is it got me one of my first cooking jobs. I worked for Jean-Jacques Rocheux at La Côte Basque in New York, which is not around anymore. I think it was around for like 80 years or something, with like 2 menu changes or something. So there were 3 of us interviewing for the job, and then they put us all in the basement, and they had us do tournays. Right. And I was pretty fresh out of culinary school, so it was still, it was still fresh in my mind. And so I was able, I had my culinary school tournay knife, and and I was able to just, just kind of knock them out and do, and then, unfortunately I got the job, and then part of my prep every day was doing 4 scallop buckets full of tournays for this, classic, the Tornado Rossini. I remember that was the dish. It had like 5 different types of tournays on it.
Yeah.
Very old school.
Yeah, super old school. So I have a soft spot for them because one is, because it got me the job, and everybody else was like, why would I need to know how to tournay at all? And then the other reason is I ended up marrying into a French family. And
Classic mistake.
they love those things. Well, now I know, but no, I'm just joking. But do you want me to rank them too? 'Cause,
Yeah. In what order do you love your family?
but yeah, they just love tournay knives, and it drives me nuts because they'll cut up a watermelon with that thing.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
You're
But
just
yeah,
having
it's still
flashbacks.
and I'm like, you need a big knife, so it drives me nuts because it's so inefficient. But I would say, and then I talk about them the most when I teach sharpening, because when I teach about improper sharpening and how to avoid having curve issues and all that stuff, then I always bring up the tournay knife, because I don't 100% know that it's true, but the lore is that it was invented with improper sharpening. So
I mean, it's a good story.
Because if you see people, that when they sharpen, they ignore the heel and they ignore the tip. So bad sharpeners, they usually flatten out the knives, and then it starts turning the other way. So they were missharpening their, is that a word?
Paring?
Yeah, missharpening. Yeah, they're paring knives and petties, ground it down to nothing, had that curve, and then they realized that it was good for peeling and turning and stuff like that. So that's how I talk.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It's when they come up the most. Is when I'm talking about improper sharpening.
So you'd use them in the restaurant and never again.
Uh,
Well, except that
in that
now
one
that you're
specific restaurant?
Well, now I have, yeah.
And for watermelon.
I have a few, yeah. Yeah. I mean, what other knife would you use for a watermelon?
Oh, okay. Here we go. This is a good one. I'm curious.
I think this is one of my favorite shapes.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, mankiri, also known as a soba kiri, right? It is the most asked for knife that nobody buys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody needs
Wait,
one.
you get, like, Steelport
Nobody-
gets asked for this?
No. In my other roles, is with my shops, everybody wants one of those. Nobody buys one. Yeah, I can guarantee you, Steelport will never make soba kiri. But yeah, I don't really see. I don't really see what you need it for. Really, I never really understood.
Unless you're making
it.
100%
But-
buckwheat soba or something.
Yeah, but even though, like, I never understood it's one, I guess, because I've never used one. Yeah, it's one of the few knives that I've never used.
There's a lot of other equipment you need to get first that is
that?
very hard to find. This is like the last step in the process.
Yeah. And then again, you can use an Akiri or your,
any flat
side
knife is
out.
gonna be
Yeah,
fine.
anything. To give them a C for necessity, but I'd give them a A for coolness.
You do look cool.
Yeah.
All right, Mezzaluna.
Oh God, that's F's the lowest.
Yep.
Yeah, absolute F. Just unnecessary.
How many
where I was
herbs
at,
are
yeah.
you chopping up?
It's and there are, you just,
There's better ways to do it.
Yeah.
like what does that do that doesn't do, except for that bruises your vegetables,
Right.
because I've never seen a high quality blade on one of those.
All the ratings we've seen online for them, like
Yeah.
the best one is $17.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, how could this be made well?
Oh yeah, nah, it's just absolute garbage product. Don't know where it came from. Don't care where it came from. I never want to see one again. If anybody is thinking about buying one, I would say only buy a single blade Mezzaluna, because
the double?
people get the doubles or the
Interesting.
triples sometimes, and those are unsharpenable because
Yeah.
you can't get in there. So yeah, you have to do a bunch of workarounds and very crappy edges on those. So yeah, I would say all around F. Yeah.
This is another one that
This
we get
is-
asked about all the time.
We
like,
get this question a lot. Usefulness of a tomato knife.
Okay. So, yeah, I'd give it an F as well. People ask us also for tomato knives, and the answer is every knife is a tomato knife if you just do basic maintenance on
Yeah.
it, right?
It just needs to be sharp and you're fine.
Yeah, so every knife should be able to slice a tomato. You don't use serrated, right? Serrated edges are not for, soft, smooth stuff, as far as I'm concerned. They're for, something that's smooth on the inside and has a hard crust on the outside, right? So 99% of your tasks are going to be bread related or pastry related. We do have a lot of people, we have a reverse serration on our knife, and so it's a lot more gentle to the
The
product. It doesn't kind
scallopy
of,
looking one. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I think
so,
you have it down here.
yeah, so we have, we played around with a bunch of, different ones, and yeah, we don't like the pointy serration because it's too aggressive, right? So it wrecks the product, it wrecks your, cutting board, and it's just all around not as pleasant to use. And then so we went with the scalloped edge, and then it's better for really crusty breads, really soft, like a brioche or a challah or something, pastries. But we also have a pretty strong following with barbecue guys, 'cause it's a good brisket knife. So if you do a
Fascinating.
properly smoked brisket, it has a hard, it's called what's called a bark on it. And then if you have even a sharp, smooth edge, if you did a good bark on it, it's just gonna slide on it.
Yep.
Right. So this is able to go through that crust and not destroy the meat on the inside. So yeah, so that's the only things that you should be using a serrated knife for. Otherwise, that's a cop out. And the problem with it is, take a thin, sharp knife, cut some tomatoes, take a serrated knife, cut some tomatoes, and then compare how much juice is on your board from each one, right? Because you're destroying the cell structure of everything that you cut with a serrated knife. So if you don't have to use it, yeah. So
Do you have a take on the sharpenability of a serrated knife?
yes, for the home user. So I teach a lot of sharpening. It's one of so that's one of my main things that I do besides make knives is I teach sharpening. We encourage everybody to do their own sharpening. I wish everybody did their own sharpening so they had better edges and a better relationship with their knives. I tell almost everybody this is the only knife that's worthwhile to sharpen professionally. Go to any knife shop, farmer's market, whatever. It's a destructive process. The only way for a for a standard sharpener to sharpen a serrated knife, because all the patterns are different and no sharpener can hold all those patterns. So what people like me do, we shave a piece off the non-serrated side, and then that re-exposes everything, and then we buff it out. So you can pay $5-10 to have that done, get it sharp again, or you can spend 40 minutes at home with a file, going tooth by tooth, and then figure out a way to to deburr it. Just not a good.
Yeah.
It's just not a good way to do it. Shameless plug for our knife is I feel like people don't really respect the bread knife, right? So you don't see a lot of knives with these features in a serrated knife because people think they're disposable. We have our lifetime free sharpening, but we serrate it on that machine. We have to build our own machine because it doesn't exist for a company else our size. You either have a knife maker sitting in his forge or garage and just doing tooth by tooth, or you have big companies that do robotics, right? So we built this machine, and that's what we use to create the serrations. When it comes in for its free sharpening, we just touch it right back to the same machine, give you a factory edge every time. Which we can only do with our serration and our wheel. If somebody gives us something else, we're just not able to do it. Other sharpeners aren't able to do it. So I would say probably don't bother trying to sharpen your own serrated knives. It's just not The results aren't good. It's extremely time consuming.
Okay, these are two of my favorites, Honiski and Garaski.
Okay. I'll treat them separately.
Okay.
So the Honeski or Honesuki, I think they're really cool looking. I think if you learn how to use them, they're really good because you have what you don't have on a Western boning knife is the ability to like torque through stuff, and that's what those are made for. So yeah, I'll give it a B plus only because I don't think you have enough finesse with them. So it's
interesting.
Yeah, they're too thick to be used as just a petty or something, right? If you're just doing chickens, I think I'd give them an A. Yeah, as an all-around boning knife, which people,
Like I wouldn't want to use it for fish, but like chicken
yeah,
and turkey.
they're not for
right?
fish, but still, I would say if you're doing like again, the famous, lamb rack where you need a French bones
Sure.
and go through stuff,
Right.
and that or more intricate stuff. If you're doing, really small birds, rabbits, stuff like that, I feel like it's a little clunky.
Okay.
The Garasuki, I'm not even gonna. I don't want it in the Honesuki category. I want it in that Western Deba that I talked
Yeah,
about.
it's chunky.
Because it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just a large, thick knife that you can go through stuff and you can go that. So yeah, I would love a Garasuki. I wouldn't use it for just all-purpose, butchering though. So I guess what did I say? So yeah, B plus on the Honesuki, category switch on the Garasuki, if that's legal.
Yeah, sure, why not?
All right, we're just making our own rules.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Yeah. Two more. The petty.
Petty, I'll give it an A. I think petties are great. I think if you're not doing, I use them, every morning, just, cutting up fruit for the kids and stuff like that. I think it's a super useful knife. If I can backtrack to the boning knife again, is I think most people that come to buy a boning knife don't need a boning knife. Right? Because they're not doing anything that involves deboning. Right, and that's where this comes, right? And like I said, you're putting a different edge on this than you would on a petty, right? So it's not as good at slicing, that because it needs to be durable. Your petty doesn't need to be durable. So if I'm just, taking, if I'm just, trimming fat off a, chicken thighs or doing or slicing a chicken breast or anything like that, small fish, I like using patties for too. Yeah, I give it a solid A, just if you, as long as people don't use them as their primary.
Right.
Because a lot of people are like, okay, a chef knife's too big for me, this is my primary, and then you're just hitting your knuckles on the board. There's so many things that you can't do with the patty that you should,
Cool.
I will admit that I used a petty knife as my main knife for a very long time.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I was too afraid to use a traditional chef's knife because I thought it was too unwieldy. I was like, this is too professional for me. I need to use the petty knife. So I used it for almost everything for a very long time.
That's why I always start people on an 8-inch knife or larger, because you're usually going to end up using what you start with, and then if you develop your skills on something larger and you just never, when you were developing your skills, you didn't have a full size, so you never got as comfortable as, which sounds like you are now. But,
Yeah, I'm working up. I'm I'm definitely more comfortable with the 8-inch chef's knife now than I was with than I am with the petty knife. And now I go back and I'm like, why did I use this tiny little knife for everything before? It's stupid.
Yeah, I want to add a caveat though. Is that, so my petties that I like to use, they're not, your standard 6-inch kind of thin petty is not as useful to me. I like either a tall petty or even better, like a tall 7-inch petty. And then that I can do a lot with. Yeah.
Why do you prefer taller over?
Just again, it's all about knuckle clearance.
Knuckle
for
clearance,
me.
I see.
So I don't want a, well, with our paring knife, we went with a larger handle, went with a taller blade, so you can do some stuff. But again, I can't
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's so much that you can't do with that you really just need that height so you can, chopping, rocking
in
and
there.
all kind of stuff. So, yeah. So to me, blades need to have a certain amount of height unless they need to be maneuverable through specified tasks.
And the last one, I think the only one, no, one of two we don't have still on the counter, the slicer.
Okay. Slicer. Oh God, that's tough. Let's say it depends on the person, right? So it depends if you need one or not.
Specialty knife.
If you need one, if you need one, I would say I haven't given out an S yet, right? And this is the last one.
You gave one
So-
to the boning knife as well.
Okay, all right. So I'll give it an S if you need one, right? S for slicer. And the main reason is, again, a lot of people don't like a full-size knife, right? So they're not going to have, like, I use either, the kind of 8s or like the 9.5s, like the 240 millimeters. Most people do have smaller knives. They kind of cap out about 6 to 7 inches, 8 max. With a slicer, the idea is not to run out of blade. Right? So you don't want to be sawing through something. You want to be able to do it in 1 or 2 clean cuts, right?
So what would you use one for?
Mainly fish. So carving, right? If I'm carving a larger roast, if I'm doing if I'm doing a large roast or a prime rib or something, again, I need something with more length, and I need something that can, so I'm not sawing through and I can do it in 1 or 2 clean cuts. And the main reason that I like them is because I put a vastly different type of edge on my slicer, because I'm not beating it up
Right.
against the counter. So I can go super low angles, super sharp, finesse style edge, which I wouldn't want to use for an all-purpose knife. So I say, as a specialty knife, So I like it. I like it if you put really low angles on it, so it's sharper.
Got it.
More finesse driven than all your other knives, and then if you need that length to go through, to go through stuff. Even if especially if you're cutting fish, I would say you really, you just don't want to saw. You see it on the cut, right? You see a little step on the cut.
You want a nice clean.
Want it nice clean cut. You're not gonna. We wanted to go, so we're solid, 10 inches on this. We're not using the, the metric, standard, which goes from like 9.5 to 10.5. For a slicer and the bread knife, we found that this is the smallest one that you can still use properly.
Got it.
If that makes sense. One thing that I don't like about most slicers, again, it all comes down to that knuckle clearance. So we put a curve on ours. Right. So our bread knife and our slicer, they have this swoop, and then even though it's a narrow blade, my knuckles are nowhere near the board.
Definitely specialty.
Yeah, definitely specialty on that one. S if you need one, and I'd go again with like a C or let's go D if you don't.
Yeah. D if you don't. I love that. I will admit on this one too, Bryn added this as the last one, and I was like, what do you even use this for? And then he was like, well, like ham, right?
Yeah.
Or like, I'm like, oh, like Christmas stuff.
Yeah.
I get
Christmas.
it. Yeah, I immediately went to National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Is that the one where he's like cutting open the turkey and he has this giant knife out that he's ready to, and he tries to slice open the turkey and it just like
all the air comes out, right?
it, like, explodes. And I was like, oh, I get why you would use this knife though.
Probably won't use it for a turkey.
I don't know. You probably would use it for.
I give that movie an S if we're talking.
okay.
Yeah, if we're ranking movies too.
Ending on a high note.
2 S's on a. Yeah.
2 S's in it. I like that. This is a good conversation.
A totally normal thing to say. Thank you so much. This has been
Absolutely,
great.
yeah. Appreciate you guys visiting us and having me on your podcast.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This was a good conversation.
It was one of our first interviews, okay? But Eytan was such a good sport. Actually, the whole team.
The whole team of Steelport was phenomenal.
Such good sports. They let us basically take the space for the afternoon, and it was
While they were
so
setting up for an
nice.
event.
Yeah, it was so nice of them.
They were very generous.
Anyway, that's all we have for this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Grant and Emily and Lim for asking the questions.
And to Eytan and the Steelport team for doing absolutely rank.
If you have questions that you want to ask on the show, you can go over to cultflave.com/community, hop over into our Going Off channel and ask them there. Or you can call and leave a voicemail for us.
424-419-3528.
That's it.
We're going to work on getting international voice messages in here. We'll solve that.
Yeah. But also, head over to the cultflave.com community. Bryn just updated it. It looks pretty sick.
It's so different. There's a lot to do yet. There will always be a lot to do, I guess. But at least I'm not on it 24 hours a day now, for like I have been for the last 3 weeks.
Pretty chaotic for a while there.
It's almost a structural rewrite of the site. So it's a lot. But Now we can just start improving from here.
Yes.
I'm
Also, if
excited.
you're interested in supporting the show, it's $20 a year. You can.
It's pay what you want, starting at $20 a year.
What?
And there'll be a link in the description.
Yeah.
Wherever you're watching this, listening to this, whatever. Thank
Easy.
you for listening or watching or whatever. And also, thank you for considering subscribing. We appreciate it.
We do. We really do. It helps us make more cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all we got. Do you want to eat some more gummies?
Yeah.